So I was 17 on November 5th of 2010. I was a grade 12 student. I was going about my usual morning routine. I was walking to school up Confederation Street, crossing the intersection at Fairview Road, and silence. Silence is what I remember when the car making a left-hand turn hit me. I remember being completely terrified and not knowing what was going to happen. I was scared, and sure, of course, it was a Friday morning. It's not how I wanted to start my day. I was scared, but minor injuries. So why am I sharing this story? What's the purpose of it? This experience was the root of me learning forgiveness. And it then just forced me to learn self-awareness, gratitude, celebrating life, and self-love. So I believe, and I don't know if you can agree with me, or maybe you believe this as well. I believe that whenever we're faced with a challenge, we have at least one of two choices. And I'll claim it as the positive and the negative choice. So for example, in this scenario, the positive choice, be thankful for minor injuries, as simple as that. Or the negative choice, be pissed off that this happened. So hands up if you think I chose the positive choice. Didn't think so. This time I chose the negative choice, and I became really nasty to the people that loved me. I couldn't believe, who I had become in this process. I was really angry, frustrated, scared, and really all I could focus on was, why did this happen to me, and why did my family not care to call me? Poor me, poor me. I hated going to physiotherapy 3 times a week. I hated that I had to go and see a psychologist. And I hated most of all that I had to relive that day over and over and over again because I had to make sure that I was telling the same story over and over and over again to every single insurance person that I saw. No wonder I was, a little bit irritated. So roughly about a year later, I remember being at home with my mom and we were having dinner, and I'm not sure what sparked this conversation. I probably said something pretty terrible because that's who I had become. But she said something along the lines of, Ashley, you don't have to hate the world. And that was the trigger to my shift, because it was in that moment that I couldn't believe who I had become. I couldn't recognize myself anymore. And it was in that moment, when I say that I was talking about how I became very nasty, I mean that there was days that I wouldn't speak to my mom, and she was the person who took me to every single physiotherapy appointment, encouraged me to go and see a psychologist. She was the one who was trying to defend me and tell me, why does she have to tell this story all over again? She's already said it so many times. And I paid her back by going days without speaking to her. And this is something that I don't think I've ever really shared with anyone, but it's one of the things that I'm most disappointed about, is that I started to say some pretty hateful things towards the culture of the man who hit me. And it was in that moment when my mom had said, Ashley, you don't have to hate the world. That's when I knew something needed to change. And so again, I realized one of two choices. I could keep going down that path that I was on, or I could just face this challenge head on. And now I had no idea what that was gonna look like, because as a young girl, I was shy, and any sign of confrontation, maybe you're like me, I was running in the opposite direction. There was no way. But for me, I knew that being who I was not cutting it. I couldn't stay there. So, even though I didn't know what this journey was gonna look like, facing the challenge head on, I knew where I needed to start. I needed to start with forgiving myself. I need to forgive myself for how I acted, for all the hateful things that I said, for how I treated other people, for not being grateful that I just had minor injuries. And it was in this process of me navigating forgiveness that I started to really develop a better relationship with myself, and started to develop this relationship of self-awareness. Because what I was really doing was just looking at myself from this bird's eye view, and you were talking about it, Tiffany, that I was just looking at myself and saying, how could I have done better? What could I have done differently? How did I assume something? How did I take something personally? It was in that moment of me really evaluating myself that the moment I learned forgiveness, the moment I forgave myself for everything, I took back control. So I invite you to kind of look at forgiveness as, not letting that person off the hook and making sure that they feel the same pain that you're experiencing, but it's more about an act of taking back control. For me, forgiveness, like I said, forgiveness I think was the root of me writing this book, The Key to Happiness. It's the start. It's forgiving ourselves and then forgiving other people in that moment. And what I realized through this experience as well is that there's a great power that I had inside of me. And it's that I get to be the creator of my reality. I get to choose how I show up. I get to live a best life, and it's really just being happy. I get to choose how I react in situations. And the thing is every single one of us in this room have that exact same power. We get to choose how we react in any situation. It's just a matter of choosing. It's a matter of choosing to be self-aware, choosing to let go, choosing to forgive, choosing to celebrate your life, choosing to be thankful, choosing to love yourself. Because when you choose each and every one of these things, and I know it's simple, it's not easy, but it's very possible. But when you take a moment to just choose each and every one of these things, you're giving yourself, that's truly the key to living and experiencing happiness, true happiness. So I invite you, when you leave here today or the rest of the week, and you just think about, how can you be a little bit more self-aware? And how can you love yourself just a little bit more this week? How can you be just a little bit more thankful? How can you just celebrate yourself this week? Is there someone that you need to forgive, or maybe you need to forgive yourself for something? Just choose to do that. And that's the key starting point to experiencing happiness. And if you really don't know where to start, I brought a couple of copies of my book, and you can see how I did it. And you can really just, you can start applying how I did it in my life, because, I was able to go through with forgiving my dad, the daddy issues, quote unquote. So just start by making that choice, and really start by forgiving yourself and forgiving others, and work through the process. Thank you.